Welcome back, and we are joined this evening by Mr. Jack Markell, and welcome to the program.
Thanks, good to be here.
Pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
And we have been, as many of you viewers have been watching, doing a series involving community leaders and community residents on examining the situation in Delaware concerning the criminal justice system and the costs involved and the fact that we're really heading for kind of bankruptcy if it continues in the course it's going, and we're looking for a variety of ways to change that. And we went up on Jack Markell's website, and he has got some proposals that were very interesting, dealing with strengthening the community, doing increased access to drug treatment before alternatives to sentencing so we don't lock everybody up and throw away the key, because many of you may have read in last week's News Journal that Delaware is now to the point where we are spending as much money to incarcerate people as we are on higher education. So maybe you can talk to us a little bit about some of these programs that you're coming up with.
Sure, well, thanks for having me. I just think that any government has no more fundamental responsibility than keeping its citizens safe. So there's a lot of discussion when we talk about public safety. There's a lot of discussion about police on the streets, which is very important, and in fact I recently released a proposal focused on more policing, smarter policing, so on and so forth. But that's really only half of the issue. The other half of the issue has to do with how do we strengthen our society, how do we strengthen our community so that we have fewer people that are engaged in the criminal justice system in the first place. And one of the aspects of that does have to do with this issue of substance abuse treatment. There are 18,000 people in Delaware who want treatment, who need treatment, but who are not able to get it because the money's not there. So one of the things that I've done is I've proposed that we put some additional money into treatment so we get more people in. And this is both it'll affect the criminal justice system, and it's also just to help families. I mean, there are a lot of people who are dealing with these issues. As it relates to the issue of incarceration, it costs somewhere close to $25,000 a year now to incarcerate a person in Delaware. It's a lot of money. 97% of the people who are in prison will be coming back onto the street. So we can't at all afford to put our heads in the sand and think that this is not really a big issue for us, because it's a huge issue. Many of them do have issues with substance abuse treatment. We have to make sure that obviously we want to start with babies to make sure that they are on the right path in life and they get the appropriate care when they're from birth to 3, when their brains are developing from 3 to 5, and certainly in school. The better job we do with that, the fewer of them will end up in the criminal justice system in general. But once they're in the criminal justice system, we've got to do everything we can to make sure people get the treatment they need, and then when they're ready to re-enter society from prison, they have the resources they need, the skills, the social development, a safe place to go afterwards. So I think all of these issues are very much tied together. Well, look, I mean, I think you're right. Can we afford not to? Because if we don't spend the money now, we know where we end up. It's such a better investment to spend the money up front to prevent the problem from happening in the first place than to deal with it afterwards. Now, you ask a critical question: where do the resources come from? And you talked about you said it's a question of resources. Well, you know what? Government is a question of resources. Leadership is a question of resources. This is why we elect a governor. This is why we elect members of the General Assembly. Nobody said this is easy, and what it's really all about is having a governor who has to choose between competing demands on those resources. And I think your viewers really need to evaluate all of the candidates for all of the offices and really get a sense of what their priorities are. To your question of where the resources come from, because we have lots of fiscal challenges in the state. This is just one of them. We have a changing job market. We have shrinking revenues in some critical categories. So we have to do two things. First of all, we have a $3.4 billion budget in Delaware. There is absolutely, without question, some relatively significant number of dollars that we could be spending more wisely. And as a top priority, we have to get at that. The best way to get at that is to talk to the people who are working now, the employees who are, frankly, overseeing all of those programs. We're doing some things that we probably don't need to be doing anymore. We're engaged in some activities that we could be more efficient at. So the whole issue of getting a handle on that spending, I think, is absolutely critical. The second piece is economic development. When we think about the changing job market, when we think about the challenges facing us, I think as governor, for sure, I'd focus like a laser beam on how do we create good, high-wage jobs, because they will generate the tax revenue that we need. I've already put out a detailed plan on my website, and that's www.markell.org, where I've laid out the specific ideas about how we're going to create 25,000 good, high-wage jobs in my first term in office. You know, it's very easy for a candidate for office to say we have this problem or we have that problem. It's something entirely different to say here's what we ought to do about it. And that's what I'm doing as part of my campaign, and I encourage people to go to my website and they'll see very detailed proposals like the one we're talking about here on strengthening society, like economic development, like health care, like how we help our seniors. There's so many issues, and we ought to be held accountable for our ideas and then how we implement them afterwards. Question. First of all, I think there is a thirst for change. There is an absolute desire for a new direction in Delaware as it relates to these issues and as it relates to many issues. And that's what's really fueling the enthusiasm for my campaign right now. That's why I really feel good about it, because so many people up and down the state tell me they love Delaware, but they also know that we can do better, which is really what I believe as well. Now, you said, what can the public do? Frankly, that is the critical question, because if the public is not engaged, if the public is not pushing, none of this happens. You know, elected officials, even good elected officials, can only go so far. We have to all work together, and that includes having more than a campaign. The real work begins the day after the election, when we have to keep the coalition together, when we have to keep the movement together, if we're going to enact and make a reality the kinds of changes that we all envision, the kinds of changes that we all know are possible. It will only be possible, though, if we stick together.
So the next step then, as far as you're concerned, what do we need to tell our legislators? I mean, specific messages that we can...
Well, you need to, and you have to get beyond the theory. You have to get beyond the 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
You got to get to, here's how it gets done. Now, let's face it. I think I've laid out some very good proposals here. I don't believe that every one of them is going to be implemented as I suggest they should be on the time frame I suggest they should be. But we've got to start with something, and that's why, as a candidate, I have laid out these very detailed proposals. And what I want is I want to get the public to get behind them, and if it's not these proposals are. And we have to advance. First we have the debate. First we do the education. Why is this an issue? Are we going to do something more than just pay lip service to it? And if we are, what specifically are we going to do? I've laid it out. But now's the time, particularly during an election year, but even after the election year, what are the specifics going to be? And I encourage people, especially since I'm running for governor, I've put the specifics out there. I ask people, I urge people, go to the website and then let us know what you like. Let us know, importantly, what you don't like. What should have the issue all wrong? Maybe we're thinking about it in the wrong way. Maybe we've got the issue right, but our proposals aren't quite right. You know, this in a democracy, you'd have to have those kinds of conversations and that kind of debate. And I look forward to that.
And to sum up, then, I suggest that if you have the opportunity, go to your website. It's www.markell.org.
And if you don't have, and I'll just speak to the camera, if you don't have a computer, you don't have access to the internet, call our office, which is 283-1420. Again, that's 283-1420, and ask for our proposal on strengthening society, strengthening our communities. We'll be happy to put one in the mail to you. But really, let's get past the talk. We've had enough talk. Let's get to the action. Let's decide what needs to be done, and let's do it. And I urge you to read what I've put together. Let us know what you think ought to be changed, and we'll take all of that into consideration.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on the program this evening.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much
for taking time out of your schedule. And again, go to the website. Take a look. See what these proposals are. It was some good reading. And stay tuned. We'll be